Tommy was just 7 years old when his life changed forever. It was the summer of 1987, and his family had decided to go camping in the Nevada desert. His dad loved the outdoors, and his mom enjoyed the peace and quiet away from the city. Tommy was excited because he had never seen so many stars before. The camping trip started like any other family vacation. They set up their tent near some big rocks, cooked hot dogs over the fire, and told scary stories until bedtime. Tommy's little sister fell asleep first, curled up in her sleeping bag like a tiny caterpillar. His parents stayed up talking by the dying campfire while Tommy lay in his sleeping bag, staring up at the incredible night sky. The stars looked different in the desert. There were thousands of them, twinkling like diamonds on black velvet. Tommy had never seen anything so beautiful. He kept thinking about how big space must be and whether anyone else was out there looking back at him. Around midnight, Tommy woke, up feeling thirsty. He could hear his parents snoring softly in their tent. Being a curious kid, he decided to sneak out and get some water from their cooler. The desert was surprisingly cold at night, and goosebumps covered his arms as he tiptoed around the campsite. That's when he saw the strange light. At first, Tommy thought it might be another camper with a really bright flashlight. The light was coming from behind the large rocks about 50 yards away from their camp. But this wasn't like any flashlight he'd ever seen. It was silver-white and seemed to pulse gently, like a giant firefly, instead of going back to wake his parents. Tommy did what most 7-year-olds would do. He decided to investigate. After all, it might be something cool, like a meteor that had fallen from space. He grabbed his small flashlight and quietly walked toward the mysterious glow. As he got closer, Tommy realized the light wasn't coming from the ground. It was hovering about 3 feet in the air, casting strange shadows on the desert rocks. The light seemed to be scanning the area, moving back and forth in a pattern that looked almost intelligent. Tommy hid behind a boulder and watched, his heart beating fast with excitement and a little bit of fear. The light was definitely not normal. It made a soft humming sound, like the refrigerator at home, but quieter and more musical. Then something incredible happened. The light seemed to notice him. It stopped moving and pointed directly at his hiding spot. Tommy felt a warm, tingling sensation all over his body, like when his foot fell asleep but not uncomfortable. The tingling was strongest on his left shoulder, right on his shoulder blade. Before he could run or call for help, the light suddenly flashed much brighter. Tommy squeezed his eyes shut and felt a sharp burning sensation on his back. It lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like someone had pressed a hot cookie cutter against his skin. When he opened his eyes, the light was gone. The desert was dark and quiet again, with only the normal sounds of wind and distant coyotes. Tommy's shoulder blade was throbbing with pain, but when he tried to look at it, he couldn't twist around far enough to see what had happened. Scared and confused, Tommy ran back to the campsite as fast as he could. He wanted to wake his parents, but he was afraid they might be angry that he had wandered off alone. Instead, he crawled back into his sleeping bag and tried to ignore the burning pain on his back. The next morning, Tommy's mom noticed him wincing when he put on his t-shirt. "What's wrong, honey?" she asked, concerned. When she lifted his shirt to look, she gasped. There on Tommy's left shoulder blade was a mark unlike anything she had ever seen. It wasn't a normal burn or cut. The mark was perfectly geometric, almost like a complex snowflake pattern, but it seemed to shimmer and change color depending on how the light hit it. Tommy's parents rushed him to the nearest hospital, which was 2 hours away in the city. The doctors were completely puzzled. They had never seen anything like it. The mark looked like a burn, but it was too precise and detailed to be from any normal source. One doctor said it looked almost like a tattoo, but the skin wasn't damaged the way tattoo skin would be. "Could it have been lightning?" Tommy's dad asked, hopefully. The doctors shook their heads. Lightning burns looked completely different, and besides, there hadn't been any storms the night before. The sky had been perfectly clear. They took pictures of the mark and ran several tests, but none of them could explain what had caused it. The strange thing was that the mark didn't seem to be getting better or worse. Most burns either heal or get infected, but Tommy's mark just stayed exactly the same. After that camping trip, Tommy's life became very different. The mark on his shoulder never went away, never faded, and never stopped being sensitive. Sometimes it would tingle or feel warm for no reason at all. Tommy learned to hide it under his clothes because other kids would stare and ask uncomfortable questions. But the mark wasn't the only change. Tommy started having incredibly vivid dreams about flying through space and meeting beings made of silver light. In his dreams, these beings spoke to him without using words, communicating through thoughts and feelings instead. During the day, strange things began happening around Tommy. Electronic devices would act funny when he was near them. TVs would change channels by themselves, radios would pick up weird signals, and digital clocks would blink randomly. His parents thought their house had electrical problems, but the issues only happened when Tommy was around. Tommy also discovered he could sense weather changes long before anyone else. He would wake up knowing it was going to rain, even when the sky was perfectly blue. His mom started joking that he was better than the weatherman on TV. As the years passed, Tommy learned to keep these strange abilities to himself. He didn't want to be seen as weird or different from other kids. But deep down, he knew that whatever had happened to him that night in the desert had changed him forever. The mark on his shoulder blade remained his biggest secret and his most constant reminder that somewhere out there, among all those stars he had been looking at, something had looked back at him and left its mark. Tommy often wondered if he would ever find out what had really happened that night, or if the strange tingling in his scar meant that whatever had marked him might someday return. Tommy was now 43 years old, and that 7-year-old boy from the Nevada desert had grown up to become Dr. Thomas Chen, one of the world's leading experts on finding life beyond Earth. But his friends just called him Tom. Every morning when Tom got dressed, he would catch a glimpse of that strange mark on his shoulder blade in the bathroom mirror. After all these years, it still looked exactly the same as it did when he was 7. Sometimes he wondered if other people thought he was crazy for dedicating his entire life to searching for something that most people didn't even believe existed. Tom's office at the university was filled with star charts, satellite images, and equipment that could detect the tiniest signals from space. His colleagues respected his work, but they often whispered that he was a bit too obsessed with finding aliens. If only they knew the real reason why. The dreams had never stopped. Even as an adult, Tom would wake up several times a week with vivid memories of silver beings and strange places among the stars. The dreams felt more real than his actual memories sometimes. In them, he could hear beautiful music that seemed to come from the universe itself, and he could understand a language made of colors and feelings instead of words. His colleagues thought his passion for space came from childhood trauma. They assumed the camping accident had somehow damaged his brain and made him fixated on outer space. Tom let them think that. It was easier than trying to explain the truth. But Tom knew better. The mark on his back wasn't just a scar from some weird accident. It was a message, a calling card, maybe even a tracking device. And after 36 years of research and waiting, he was finally getting close to finding answers. In 2023, Tom received a call that would change everything. Dr. Rodriguez, a fellow scientist from Chile, had detected some very unusual readings in the Atacama Desert. The Atacama was one of the driest places on Earth, so dry that NASA used it to test equipment for Mars missions. But it was also one of the best places in the world to study space because the skies were so clear and dark. "Tom, you need to see this," Dr. Rodriguez said over the phone, his voice shaking with excitement. The electromagnetic patterns we're picking up, they're not natural, and they're not from any human technology either. When Tom saw the data that Dr. Rodriguez sent him, his heart nearly stopped. The patterns were identical to the ones he had been drawing in his notebook since childhood. The same geometric shapes that appeared in his dreams, the same rhythmic pulses that he heard in his sleep. Tom booked a flight to Chile that same day. The Atacama Desert was like stepping onto another planet. The landscape was so barren and rocky that it looked more like Mars than Earth. During the day, the sun was blazing hot, but at night, the temperature dropped so much that Tom needed a heavy jacket. Tom spent his first few days in Chile setting up his equipment and talking to the local people. The indigenous communities in the area had lived there for thousands of years, and they had stories that made his skin tingle with recognition. An elderly woman named Maria told him about the star visitors that her grandmother's grandmother used to talk about. According to the old stories, these beings had been coming to the desert for generations, always at night, always near the same rocky hills. My great-great-grandmother said they were peaceful, Maria explained as they sat around a small fire. She said they would come down from the sky in lights that moved like water. Sometimes they would take small things from the desert, rocks, plants, sand, but they never hurt anyone. Tom asked if anyone had ever gotten close to these visitors. Maria nodded slowly. The stories say that sometimes, if someone was very pure, of heart, or very curious, the star people would mark them. It was considered a great honor. Those people would have strange dreams for the rest of their lives, dreams of flying among the stars. That night, alone in his tent, Tom felt his scar beginning to react more strongly than it ever had before. Instead of the usual gentle tingling, it was actually warm to the touch. When he looked at it in his small camping mirror, he could swear it was glowing very faintly in the darkness. Over the next week, Tom's equipment picked up stronger and stronger signals. The electromagnetic readings were getting more intense every night, and they seemed to be coming from a specific area about 5 miles north of his camp. But the strangest thing was how his body was reacting. The closer he got to the source of the signals, the more his scar would burn and tingle. It was like having a built-in compass that was pointing him towards something incredible. Tom also noticed that his dreams were becoming more vivid and frequent. Now he was dreaming every single night, and the dreams were so clear that he would wake up feeling like he had actually traveled to other worlds. In his dreams, the silver beings seemed more real than ever, and they appeared to be trying to tell him something important. His equipment began malfunctioning in ways that should have been impossible. Digital displays would show symbols instead of numbers. Radios would pick up what sounded like music from another dimension, and his GPS would point toward stars instead of earthly directions. Tom realized he was close to something that would change everything he thought he knew about the universe. The same force that had marked him as a child was calling to him again, and this time he was old enough and smart enough to understand what was happening. On his 10th night in the Atacama Desert, Tom woke up suddenly at 3 a.m. His scar was burning so intensely that he could barely stand it. Outside his tent, he could see a faint glow coming from the direction where his equipment had been detecting the strongest signals. Tom grabbed his flashlight and his camera, but deep down, he knew that no human technology was going to be able to capture what he was about to see. After 36 years of searching, something was finally ready to be found. Tom stepped out of his tent into the cold desert night, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. The burning sensation in his scar was unlike anything he had ever experienced. It felt like his shoulder blade was on fire, but not in a painful way. It was more like energy was flowing through him, connecting him to something far away. The desert was completely silent, except for the soft humming of his equipment. Even the usual sounds of night insects and distant coyotes had stopped, as if nature itself was holding its breath. The stars above looked brighter than usual, and Tom noticed that some of them seemed to be moving in patterns that defied everything he knew about astronomy. As he walked toward the source of the strange glow, Tom's scientific mind tried to stay calm and logical. Maybe it was just unusual weather conditions creating some kind of atmospheric light show. Maybe his equipment was malfunctioning and creating false readings. But deep in his heart, he knew this was the moment he had been waiting for his entire life. The glow was coming from behind a cluster of large rocks about half a mile from his camp. As Tom got closer, he realized the light wasn't reflecting off the rocks. It was coming from something behind them. The light had the same silver-white quality that he remembered from his childhood, and it pulsed gently like a heartbeat. Tom crept around the rocks as quietly as possible and found himself looking at something that made his breath catch in his throat. Hovering about 10 feet off the ground was a craft unlike anything humans had ever built. It wasn't a typical flying saucer shape like in the movies. Instead, it looked like a beautiful piece of art made from liquid metal and light. The surface seemed to flow and shift, and it gave off a soft, musical humming sound. For a moment, Tom just stood there staring, trying to convince himself that he wasn't dreaming. But the cold desert air on his skin and the intense burning in his scar told him this was absolutely real. Then something even more incredible happened. A section of the craft's surface began to open, not like a door or hatch, but more like the craft was made of water and was simply creating an opening. 3 figures emerged and floated gently down to the desert floor. Tom's childhood dreams suddenly made perfect sense. These were the silver beings he had been seeing in his sleep for 36 years. They were tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to be made of starlight itself. Their faces were kind and peaceful, with large eyes that held wisdom older than human civilization. The beings moved toward him with fluid, dancing steps that barely seemed to touch the ground. Tom wanted to run, but his feet felt rooted to the desert floor. His scar was now glowing so brightly that he could see its light through his shirt. The closest being stopped about 6 feet away from Tom and tilted its head, studying him with obvious curiosity. Then, without opening its mouth, Tom heard a voice inside his mind. The voice was gentle and musical, like wind chimes in a soft breeze. "You are the marked one," the voice said. "The child who wandered too close all those years ago." Tom tried to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he found that he could somehow think his response, and the being would understand. "What did you do to me?" Tom thought. The being's expression seemed to show something like regret. "It was an accident. We were young scouts, learning to observe your world without being detected. You were supposed to sleep through our visit, but you were too curious, too brave for a small child." Another being stepped forward, and Tom heard a different voice in his mind, this one deeper and more serious. "We were studying your species, trying to understand if humans were ready for contact with our civilization. Part of our process involved marking certain individuals, creating a small, temporary connection that would allow us to monitor their development." The third being joined the conversation, its mental voice warm and almost motherly. "But something went wrong with your marking. Instead of the usual temporary tag that fades after a few days, you received a permanent genetic alteration. We have been watching you from afar ever since, amazed that you survived such an intense marking." Tom's mind was spinning with questions. "Watching me? How? Why?" The first being stepped closer, and Tom could see his own reflection in its large, silver eyes. "Your mark makes you visible to our quantum sensors across vast distances of space. Every dream you have had, every strange sensation in your scar, every time your electronics malfunction, these are all side effects of carrying a piece of our technology in your DNA. We never intended to change you so dramatically," the second being continued. "Most humans cannot handle even a temporary marking without serious mental damage. But you adapted and grew stronger. You became something new, part human, part connected, to our quantum network." The third being's mental voice carried notes of wonder and respect. In our 50,000 years of observing developing civilizations, we have never seen anything like what happened to you. You have lived with our technology in your body for over 3 decades and not only survived, but thrived. Tom looked down at his hands, expecting to see them shaking with fear or excitement. Instead, he felt strangely calm and peaceful. Being here, talking with these beings, felt like coming home after a very long journey. What happens now? He thought. The beings looked at each other, and Tom could sense them having a rapid conversation in a language made of colors and emotions that his human mind couldn't fully understand. Finally, the first being spoke again. Now we must make a decision that has never been made before in our civilization's history. Our leaders on the home world have been monitoring your development. They want to meet you. Your unique marking has created a situation that requires the attention of our highest council, the second being added. You are no longer just a human with some of our technology. You have become a bridge between our species. The third being's mental voice carried a hint of excitement. Tom, you have the opportunity to be the first human to visit our homeworld and meet our people as an equal, not just as a subject of study. Tom's scar pulsed with warmth as he realized that his entire life, the dreams, the strange abilities, his career studying space, even coming to this desert, had all been leading to this moment. The choice that would determine his future was about to be offered to him. The 3 silver beings stood quietly for a moment, letting Tom process everything they had told him. The desert wind picked up slightly, carrying the scent of ancient rocks and distant mountains. Tom's scar continued to pulse with gentle warmth, like a second heartbeat that connected him to these incredible visitors. The first being stepped forward again, its large eyes reflecting the starlight above. When it spoke in Tom's mind, the voice carried both excitement and concern. Tom, what we are about to tell you has never happened before in our civilization's long history. Our people have been watching the stars and studying developing worlds for over 50,000 of your Earth years. In all that time, we have never made the offer we are about to make to you. Tom felt his knees go weak. Whatever was coming next was going to be life-changing in ways he couldn't even imagine. The second being continued the explanation. When you received your permanent marking as a child, it created a quantum connection between you and our home world. This connection has been growing stronger over the decades. Our most sensitive instruments have been tracking your development, your dreams, even your emotions. 3 months ago, the third being added, something unprecedented happened. Our Eternal Queen herself noticed your signal among the millions of other quantum signatures we monitor across the galaxy. She has ruled our people for longer than human civilization has existed, and she has never shown personal interest in any individual from a developing world. Tom's mind raced with questions, but he found himself too amazed to form coherent thoughts. The first being seemed to sense his confusion and spoke with gentle patience. The Queen has made a decision that has shocked our entire council of advisors. She wants to meet you personally, not as a specimen to be studied, but as an equal, as someone who carries part of our quantum essence within their very DNA. This has never been done before, the second being emphasized. We have protocols for studying primitive civilizations from a distance. We have procedures for eventual first contact when a species reaches sufficient technological development. But we have never brought an individual from a developing world to our home system to meet our leadership. The third being's mental voice carried notes of wonder and disbelief. Tom, you must understand how extraordinary this is. Our queen rules over 847 different worlds, each with billions of inhabitants. She governs a civilization that spans multiple star systems, and she wants to meet a human from Earth. Tom finally found his mental voice. Why? What makes me so special? The beings exchanged those rapid bursts of colorful communication again before answering. Your marking should have killed you. the first being explained. The quantum technology we accidentally embedded in your DNA is designed for our species, not yours. The fact that you not only survived but adapted and grew stronger suggests something remarkable about human potential. More importantly, the second being continued, the connection between you and our quantum network has been affecting both sides. While you have been having dreams of our world, some of our most sensitive individuals have been having dreams of yours. The Queen herself has reported dreams of Earth, of human emotions and experiences that she should not be able to access. The third being's voice carried a hint of something that might have been awe. In other words, Tom, you haven't just been changed by us. You have been changing us too. The quantum connection works both ways. And after 36 years, it has created something entirely new. Tom looked up at the incredible craft hovering silently above them. The reality of what they were suggesting hit him like a physical force. You want me to go with you, to another star system, to meet your queen? Yes, all three beings replied in unison, their mental voices harmonizing like a beautiful chord. But, the first being continued, we must be completely honest about what this choice means. The journey to our home world takes 4 of your Earth days through folded space. The experience would show you wonders beyond human imagination. Cities that float between stars, worlds covered in crystal forests, beings of pure energy who paint with light itself. However, the second being added, with obvious reluctance, we cannot guarantee that you would ever be able to return to Earth. Our quantum travel technology might not work the same way on someone with your unique hybrid marking. You might be able to make the journey to our world, but not back to yours. The third being's voice was gentle but serious. This choice would mean leaving behind everything and everyone you have ever known. Your work, your life, your entire species. You would be stepping into a universe far larger and stranger than most humans can comprehend. Tom felt the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. Everything he had worked for, everything he had dreamed about, was being offered to him. But the cost might be everything he had ever known. How long do I have? To decide? He asked. We must depart before dawn, the first being replied. Our ship's energy signature will soon be detected by your planet's satellites. We cannot risk exposing our presence to your world's governments before your species is ready for official contact. Tom looked back toward his camp, where his tent and equipment sat in the darkness. Somewhere beyond the horizon was the life he had built, his university, his research, his few close friends who understood his obsession with finding life among the stars. But he also thought about the dreams that had guided him his entire life, the mark on his back that had connected him to something greater than Earth, and the questions that had driven him to spend 36 years searching for this moment. If I go with you, Tom said slowly, what exactly would happen when I meet your queen? The three beings looked at each other, and for the first time, Tom sensed uncertainty in their mental voices. We honestly don't know, the first being admitted. This situation has never occurred before. The Queen's interest in you is as mysterious to us as it is unprecedented. But we can tell you this, the second being added. Your meeting with her will determine not just your own fate, but possibly the future relationship between our civilizations. You would be representing all of humanity in a moment that could shape the destiny of both our species. Tom closed his eyes and felt his scar pulse with warmth. Deep in his heart, he knew that his entire life had been leading to this choice. The 7-year-old boy who had wandered into the desert looking for adventure had found something that would define not just his future, but possibly the future of all mankind. When he opened his eyes and looked at the three beings waiting patiently for his answer, Tom knew what he had to do. I'll go with you, Tom said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was agreeing to. The three beings seemed to glow brighter with what Tom interpreted as joy and relief. Without another word, they gently guided him toward their incredible craft. As they approached, the ship's surface opened like liquid mercury, creating a ramp of solid light that felt warm and firm under Tom's feet. The interior of the ship was nothing like what Tom had imagined. Instead of cold metal corridors and blinking computers, he found himself in what looked like a living garden made of crystal and starlight. The walls curved organically around them, and soft music seemed to come from the very air itself. The journey will feel like falling asleep and waking up somewhere wonderful, the first being explained, as Tom settled into what appeared to be a chair grown from a single piece of luminous crystal. Your human body isn't designed for our travel methods, but your quantum marking will protect you. Tom felt a gentle tingling sensation spreading through his body, starting from his scar and flowing outward like warm honey. The last thing he remembered was looking through a transparent section of the ship and seeing Earth growing smaller and smaller until it was just a tiny blue dot among countless stars. When Tom woke up, he was standing in the most beautiful place he had ever seen. He was on a platform made of what looked like crystallized rainbow, surrounded by towers that seemed to be built from captured starlight itself. Above him, instead of sky, there was an incredible view of space filled with colorful nebulas and 3 different suns casting gentle, warm light in shades of gold, silver, and pale blue. "Welcome to Avalon Prime," the first being said, appearing beside him. "The heart of our civilization and home to our eternal queen." Other beings similar to his 3 guides were moving around the platform, but Tom noticed they all stopped to stare at him with obvious curiosity. He realized he was probably the first human any of them had ever seen in person. "They're not being rude," the second being assured him, seeming to sense his discomfort. "They're just amazed. Word has spread throughout our world that the marked human has finally arrived. You're quite famous here." As they walked through the incredible city, Tom saw wonders that made his scientist's mind spin with excitement. There were beings made of pure energy who communicated through color patterns, creatures that looked like living flowers but moved with obvious intelligence, and structures that defied every law of physics he had ever learned. "How many different species live here?" Tom asked in amazement. "Over 200, the third being replied. "Our civilization is built on cooperation and mutual respect among many different forms of life. That's part of why your queen is so interested in meeting you. Humans show remarkable potential for the kind of cooperation our society requires." They traveled through the city in vehicles that flew silently through the air, past gardens filled with plants from dozens of different worlds, and buildings that seemed to reshape themselves based on the needs of their inhabitants. Finally, they arrived at a structure that took Tom's breath away. The Queen's palace looked like it had been carved from a single enormous diamond. It rose into the sky like a mountain of light, with surfaces that reflected not just the surrounding city, but also seemed to show glimpses of other worlds and distant stars. "The Queen is waiting," the first being announced as they entered through doors that opened without being touched. Inside, Tom found himself in a vast chamber with a ceiling so high he couldn't see the top. The walls were covered in what looked like moving murals showing the history of the universe itself. Galaxies being born, civilizations rising and falling, the dance of stars across billions of years. At the far end of the chamber, on a throne that seemed to be made of crystallized time itself, sat the most incredible being Tom had ever seen. The Queen was tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to contain entire galaxies within it. Her hair moved like liquid starlight, and her eyes held depths that spoke of wisdom accumulated over thousands of lifetimes. When she looked at Tom, he felt like she was seeing not just him, but his entire genetic history and all the potential futures stretching out before him. She rose from her throne and began walking toward him, her movements so fluid and graceful. that she seemed to be floating rather than walking. As she got closer, Tom felt his scar beginning to react more intensely than it ever had before. It wasn't painful, but it was so intense that he could feel energy coursing through his entire body. The Queen stopped about 3 feet away from Tom and studied his face with an expression he couldn't interpret. Then, without warning, she raised her hand toward his left shoulder. "May I?" she asked, and Tom was surprised to hear her speak aloud rather than communicating mentally like the other beings. Tom nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The Queen's fingers moved toward his shoulder, and even through his shirt, Tom could feel incredible energy flowing from her hand. The moment her fingers made contact with his scar, several things happened at once. The Queen's eyes widened in shock. Tom felt a surge of recognition so strong it nearly knocked him off his feet, and suddenly both of them were flooded with shared memories that belonged to neither of them individually. Tom saw flashes of the Queen as a much younger being, learning to use her marking abilities for the first time. He felt her nervousness and excitement during her first mission to observe a developing world. He experienced her horror and regret when she realized her inexperience had permanently marked a human child. At the same time, the Queen was experiencing 36 years of Tom's life through the quantum connection they shared. She felt his confusion as a child, his determination as he grew older, his loneliness when he couldn't explain his dreams to anyone, and his excitement when he finally understood what was calling to him. "So it was you," the Queen whispered, her voice filled with wonder and something that sounded almost like love. After all these years, Tom felt tears running down his cheeks, though he wasn't sure if they were from happiness, relief, or the overwhelming intensity of the shared memories. "It was an accident," the Queen continued, her hand still touching his scar. "I was so young, so inexperienced. I never meant to bind my quantum essence to a human child, but now I see what we created together." "What did we create?" Tom asked softly. The Queen smiled, and when she did, her entire being seemed to shine brighter. "Something that has never existed before in the universe," she said. "A bridge between species that goes deeper than language, deeper than culture, deeper than biology itself. For 36 years, Tom, you have been carrying a piece of my consciousness, and I have been carrying a piece of yours. Every dream you've had of other worlds came from my memories. Every time I've wondered what it would be like to experience human emotions like curiosity and hope, those feelings came from you." Tom looked into her ancient, wise eyes and saw something he had never expected to see there. He saw his own reflection, but more than that, he saw home. "What happens now?" he asked. The Queen's smile grew wider, and Tom felt a sense of belonging that he had been searching for his entire life. "Now," she said, "we discover what the universe looks like when two very different kinds of consciousness choose to work together instead of apart." As Tom stood in that incredible crystal palace, surrounded by wonders beyond imagination, he realized that his journey had only just begun.